Anyways, friends, welcome back to Kirby Russia. Today, the clapping, but thankfully we don't have to line up any audio tracks. This is all lined up in one, thanks to our friend OBS. Stanislav is back, our former U.S. Army officer who's talked to us before about the war and this and that. And I kind of just clicked on the record button because before Stanislav, he has something big he wants to tell us today. He really wanted to come back on the show, but before that, we were kind of talking about the differences between the U.S. and Russian military. And forgive me, this is not a stain. I just got back from American football, so I just got out of the shower. So forgive, just so the audience knows, I'm not filthy. But anyways, one thing I thought was kind of weird about being in the Russian military on this reality show anyways, was that on the one hand, it's extremely hardcore. They really work you. But then at the same time, the officers are kind of buddy-buddy with you, and everyone's telling jokes. Like, it's not this, the movie Full Metal Jacket. It's really not like that, except when you're actually out in the field. So, I don't know, it's very weird. What do you think are the main differences in the culture between armies?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you this. It goes against the way I was trained anyways. The Russian military, like a lot of militaries, it's actually quite stratified between officers and enlisted, in that officers eat in separate chow halls, and enlisted eat in their own chow halls. Even in the field, there'll be a separate setup. The officer goes to the front of the line. We ate in the field even in a place like Bosnia. The chow hall was one for everybody, but the officers ate last. So it went by rank, reverse rank. So the higher the rank, the further down the list you were.
That's interesting. I know actually, I like that. In the Russian Navy, for a fact, it's the opposite. The captain eats first, then you sort of go down the pyramid.
The American Navy is the same way. Navy is Navy. Navy is a different animal, totally different animal.
Oh, I see.
Honestly, I'll tell you, I prefer officers eat last, and I'll tell you why. It puts more of an emphasis on the officer to make sure the men are taken care of.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
In a field environment, yeah.
And we were also talking, you mentioned that in the Russian Army, you don't salute if someone isn't wearing their headgear. That's also interesting. I wonder what the logic of is with that.
Well, you don't salute an empty head. If there's no cover on. There's no cover on. You don't salute. It doesn't mean you don't give respect. You just don't salute. So there's no saluting indoors.
Oh.
Well, U.S. military doesn't have that. I'm not quite sure about some of the others, and the UK too. They'll salute regardless. So.
Huh. Well, anyway, Stanislav, that was interesting. I love those little nuances. But what did you want to talk to us about today? You had something you really wanted to come back on the show, which I'm a huge fan of. Whenever any of our former guests say, "Tim, I want to come on the show," I always approve it. It is always the best episodes. So, what did you want to tell us today?
Well, let's see. We haven't talked since I came back from the front lines about a month ago, have we?
No, yeah.
Last time we talked. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll be good with that. And I'm heading back down there in January on the new year. So we were down there for about four something days. Took down two cars. Well, cars. We took down a minivan, Bukhanka. Was Bukhanka, and we took down a Patriot. Was Patriot. So the Bukhanka, by the end of that day, the Bukhanka was bringing wounded guys from the front lines back in to the hospital unit that we gave it to, and the Patriot was being used by one of the field commanders in the 4th Brigade, LNR. It's all Russian now, but I mean Russian Army, regular. But originally it was LNR Army. Took down a bunch of radios, took a bunch of other military equipment. Took down, we came down in 3 cars. Came down there. One car was full of diapers, adult diapers.
Interesting. For the wounded guys?
No, for the guys that can't ever move because they're invalids. That nobody. It's there's different organizations that are helping the local invalid community. That nobody sees them because they don't go out. I mean, these are bedbound people, right?
Yeah.
And they're living artillery barrages by our friend the Yukis on the other side. May they rot in hell.
Yeah. Well.
So, yeah, the nice sponsored people by Uncle Sam who feeds them the artillery shells that they keep raining down on top of civilians. We were in Gorlovka. Gorlovka is northwest Donetsk Oblast.
And that was one of the key places that was taken away from the Ukrainian forces that Russia was able to take back. Yeah.
Yeah, early on, very early on. So there wasn't much. Well, Gorlovka has been all the damage in Gorlovka has come afterwards, and it's by our constant shelling. And you're in western side of Gorlovka, it's more or less same. There's much shelling coming in, but there are drones, so they'll drop a grenade on civilians for shits and giggles. Yeah. But that's what that Nazi scum does. I don't have too many good words for him.
Well, it's hard to be. I'll put it this way: you sort of have this sort of journalistic training, or maybe American training, where you want to be fair to everyone, but it's really hard to cut them a break. After all the things they've done, after all the war crimes and crimes against humanity and whatever terminology you want to do, it's really hard to be to give them the benefit of the doubt, or whatever they call it.
No, I'll tell you straight up. I think they deserve a fair judgment by God. It is our duty to present them to God as soon as humanly possible for their fair judgment. Let God judge them in the end.
Yeah. And the ones that survive, I think there's going to be the essentially something like the Nuremberg trials for whoever they're able to capture or whatever. But we don't know, because a few Ukrainian politicians have fled Kiev, from what I understand, but not all of them. So I think at some point there's going to be sort of a rats fleeing the sinking ship moment. So who knows how many people will actually get, let's just say, put on trial by Russian authorities at some point.
You're talking about Ukrainians. I thought you were going to talk about Blinken and Nuland and the rest of them.
Unfortunately, I am not. Unfortunately, the people in Washington who finance the nightmare, they're pretty much unpunishable unless something really radical changes in the United States. Like if the United States does some sort of like full 180-degree turn, I don't think those guys will ever get punished in any sort of way.
No, they'll get punished. They'll get the eternal punishment one way or the other.
In that sense, yes.
There's one trial that they're not going to escape from, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
So, but and you get to Western Gorlovka, where we were heading, and that's where the artillery barrages are coming, because that's the front line basically. Mm-hmm. And one of the positions we're supposed to go bring some equipment that no longer existed because it got the whole neighborhood had been destroyed. And then after that, we left. We went to Yasanawata. I've got an elderly aunt and uncle living there. Mm-hmm. And they've been living under bombardment for those that don't really understand what this is. They've been living under bombardment for 9 years. Up to about a year and a half ago, on and off. The Yukis would get drunk and shoot a few rounds into Yasanawata. Now it's continuous. In fact, one of my friends I was with, he was videotaping me and my uncle, and you can hear the shells coming in different areas. It's like, explosion here, an explosion there, and you just live with it.
The Russian media has been telling us that they're running out of money, running out of ammo. How are they able to keep shelling? Or is this like 3 shells a day?
The overall, they are, money doesn't matter here at all. The money has nothing to do with this. It's the shells. And overall, in the combat areas, they are running low on shells. Mm-hmm. The artillery, first of all, this was a month ago. So this is, the Israeli issue was just starting to explode up. Mm-hmm. It's about a little over a month ago. It was just starting to really explode up. And they were still getting, they still had a lot of supply. But you can, and some of the videos we took in different locations, and we were in Severodonetsk, Debaltseve, Yasinovatov, Gorlovka. Couldn't get into Bakhmut. That was a problem there. There's too many drones. There are a couple other places we were at. Yeah, I mean, you can hear the rounds coming in here and there. You can hear. There's one place that you could actually hear one of the cluster munitions being shot at civilians, which is what they usually use them for, civilians, because civilians are the most vulnerable. Cluster munitions are good against an enemy in the open. Yeah. So if the enemy's attacking, you cover an area with cluster munitions.
Yeah, I just saw a video a couple of weeks ago of what was supposedly the Russian side actually then in turn using that type of munitions against the Ukrainian troops. And it just created, it essentially created like a horizontal line of explosions where, it looked like there's very little hope of escape from that.
Well, you got to understand, first of all, it depends what type. First, Russia was warning that don't use cluster munitions, or we are going to use cluster munitions.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It was retaliatory. It wasn't like the first time, but yeah.
Right. 6 months. The Ukrainians had used their own cluster munitions somewhat. They didn't have that many. So the U.S., for the U.S. military, cluster munitions, no matter what they say, it's a standard part of the military outlook. That's 50% of the bombs, 50% of the artillery shells are all cluster munitions. And depending on what cluster munition you're using, like the 155 millimeter cluster artillery shell, it releases between 88 to 100 bomblets. So each bomblet's about this big. Yeah. It's like an apple. Yeah. Colored nice too, so kiddies will pick it up. It sprays out. You can set a different velocity. Different altitude. So if you drop it at low altitude, where the shell explodes out and showers out the munitions, you cover about 100 square meters. At high velocity, at high altitude, it cover up to 400 meters. Of course, it'll be a lot less coverage, density of coverage.
Less dense.
Now, the U.S. military, the Pentagon gives us BS statistic that only 1% to 2% don't explode. Crap, total crap. Always been crap. After the first Gulf War, there were studies done on brand new bombs. I mean, they were fresh off the assembly lines, basically. And they were up to 40% non-explosive, non-detonation. It doesn't mean they won't detonate later. They could detonate from the rain. They could detonate from somebody stepping on them, picking them up, or just because they feel like it. Or they could lay there for 100 years and not detonate. Yeah. That's explosives. You just never know. You never know what's going to trigger them. Kind of like a woman in anger. You never know what's going to trigger them.
And in fact, sometimes when they have these, I forget what they call them in Russia, like search crews go out and they try to excavate World War II battlefields to, dig up potentially the dead bodies and give them a proper burial. From time to time, they still find unexploded munitions from World War II, so it can happen.
Tim.
Yeah.
Back about 20 years ago, we had an incident in North Carolina. Creek bed eroded and out fell a bunch of mortar rounds. Oh. A bunch of mortar rounds from 1864.
Okay.
Well, no, it gets worse. So a couple of local fellas, they found these mortar rounds, and they decided to weld themselves a cannonade. For those who don't understand what a cannonade is, that's the little triangle of cannonballs. Looks really, really cool.
Oh, no. They blew themselves up completely. Yeah.
Up to about the 1820s. If you ever look at any of these cannonades, they're usually done with cannonballs before 1820s, 1810s. Yeah. Because the cannonballs back then didn't explode. They were just a chunk of metal that was being thrown. Yeah. And then hit something and then shatter. And in fact, in the old armies, and after that, the cannonballs, as a matter of fact, it was Russia that created, I'm sorry, it wasn't even it was 1850s. because Russia created the first explosive cannonballs, and they were used against the Turks in the first battles of the Crimean War.
Yeah.
Before it actually became the Crimean War. Russia and Turkey went to fight. The Russian fleet cornered the Turkish fleet in the harbor and just walloped the hell out of them with explosive cannonballs. Just ripped their wood to pieces. So, and then the British wrote it as a slaughter. Well, you know, whatever. It's war. In this case, these are combatants. These weren't civilians. But so any cannonballs after about 1852, everybody switched over to explosive cannonballs. Well, like I said, these guys decided to weld themselves a nice cannonade. Let me put it this way: the guy with the welder, they were picking up his head from different.
Gotcha.
What was left? Yeah, they had to call Fort Bragg. Had to send out sapper team to go blow the rest of these up.
Oh man!
And these were 100-year-old, 130-year-old cannonballs. They've been laying in clay in a bank on the side of a creek.
No.
Buried during fighting, you know, what have you, or maybe somebody's buried on purpose. Who knows? But the point is, and this is gunpowder. This is just regular, plain black gunpowder.
Well, yeah,
this
isn't the black powder days back then. Yeah.
Yeah, gun cutting came along 20 years later. Yeah. So this is, and now you're talking about, you know, high explosive ordnance that modern armies use. So yeah, it's about 40% that doesn't explode, and they get thrown out over cities, and they, you know, kids step on them or play with them. Adults, especially the elderly, can't barely see what's going on. When they'll fall in the grass, dogs, animals, you know, people.
Is there any way to like detect these with metal detectors or something? Does that work? Like sending out guys with metal detectors, or is that essentially like, you know, just a hopeless endeavor because there's so much territory to cover, and one metal detector can only cover, I don't know, 3 square meters or something?
Well, yes and no. It all depends what the grenade is made out of. If it's a plastic casing, then no. If it's a metal casing, then. But again, just so listeners can understand, the U.S. dumped probably somewhere close to over 500,000 bombs onto Cambodia. Cluster munitions. There's estimated 6.5 million cluster munitions, non-exploded cluster munitions, laying around in Cambodia's jungles and fields and so on. That was 1971, 1972. People are still walking only on trails. You go out in the jungle, you're probably going to lose a leg.
Wow.
Welcome to reality of this. I mean, it's a war crime, and this is a nation that the U.S. never declared war on, but has left basically a destroyed local economy. In fact, when the king, it gets even worse because when the king was ousted in Cambodia because of the U.S. bombing, he lost support of the people. And the Khmer Rouge came into power. Now, for those who don't remember the Khmer Rouge, they were agrarian communists of the worst kind, and they were trying to create the perfect utopian society, and they murdered about half their population. Now, the Khmer Rouge was overthrown, and they were overthrown, interestingly enough, by the Vietnamese Communist Party. And you know who stood against that and protested the loudest? The Vietnamese Communist Party, Vietnamese army invading Cambodia to overthrow the bloodthirsty Khmer Rouge? The U.S.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Because then they're like a competent enemy or something. Interesting.
It's the idiocy politics, you know, because you know everybody's the U.S. is against communists. Well, no. The U.S. is all for communists if they work for them.
In fact, I was just watched a little documentary movie about I forget how to pronounce it, Eritrea, very small country in sort of the northeast part of Africa, by Ethiopia, Sudan, all that stuff. And to be honest, they're actually still like a state communist country. even to this day. It's just that no one talks about it and it's kind of quiet. But they have a command economy, like a real command economy, like they have in like North Korea or something, which is crazy. I actually never knew about that. But again, because it's not important and it's not a big political issue, we don't fight against it in Washington. Only when it becomes convenient.
Eritrea is on the burner to blow up next, or one of the possible blow up next. You see, Eritrea used to be part of Ethiopia. The Eritreans are Arabs. The Ethiopians are not. Well, they're intermixed with the Arabs from ancient times. But Ethiopia, by the way, was the first Christian country.
Yeah.
Fully Christian country that accepted Christianity as a state religion. Armenia was second, and Rome was third.
The Armenians are going to be mad at you because the Armenians always say they were first. That's a big point of contention. I can hear the commenters. If there's any Armenians listening, they're not going to like that. So, but
Abbasia beat them by about 10 years or something like that. By the way, Abbasia was one of the only countries in Africa that was not colonized prior to World War II by the Europeans. Now, the Italians tried, and one of the bones the Italians had to pick with Russia was because of Abbasia. Your next question: how is that Russia? What was Russia's role in Ethiopia?
Good question.
Thank you for asking.
All right, tell us.
Nicholas II sent. First of all, Ethiopia is an Orthodox country. So we get that out of the way. Nicholas II, and back then it was in Ethiopia, it was Abbasia. He sent a mission, a geographical mission, to find the source of the White Nile to Abbasia. So to protect the mission, an escadron of Kazakhs, an escadron is basically about 100 Kazakhs, were sent under a colonel or lieutenant colonel to assist with the archaeological mission. And they went off into the jungle, and the bears all came back, and the emperor was paranoid because he thought they all got eaten or killed somewhere in the jungle, and nobody had any contact with them for 2 months, and 2 or 3 months, and up this group of Kazakhs, almost everybody still alive, found the source of the Nile. Well, while they were gone, the Italians decided they were going to annex Ethiopia. Selassie, the emperor of Ethiopia, or Abbasia, he bought an incredible amount of European modern weapons. Well, modern for 1810. So he bought all these weapons, but they didn't know how to fight with them. So they were planning on doing hit-and-run tactics while the Italian army was going to be going straight to the capital. And the Kazakhs had already returned to the capital, and the lieutenant colonel in charge said, "Hey, why don't we train you? You've got the weapons." So they did a crash course on how to fight European style. And when the Italians got to the border and started crossing the border to attack into Ethiopia, they got their asses handed to them, to put it mildly. They got beaten in, and they ran like broken cowards out of there. Mussolini took Ethiopia in the 30s by gassing it.
Oh,
really? They dropped gas fire from, which is why Mussolini became Hitler's ally. They hated each other, by the way. Mussolini and Hitler hated each other.
I've always heard that. Mussolini, they actually had very little in common other than they kind of liked the ideology of what they were building, but they didn't like each other very much at all. Yeah. Well,
there is a difference. First of all, Mussolini was a fascist. So fascism is a form of socialism. Because Mussolini, before that, was the head of the Socialist Party of Italy.
Yeah.
Hitler took fascism and added racial superiority to it, which created Nazism. Because the Italians, the Hungarians, the Bulgarians, the Romanians are all fascists. Well, so were the Greeks and the French, but they weren't executing their minorities.
That's also one important thing, historical note to make, is that the Romanians weren't like, quick, we've got to make death camps. That wasn't their objective. However, the Romanians did do some very nasty things to Russians during, especially around the Stalingrad area. So they weren't exactly saints, but it wasn't systemic, I guess you would say.
Right.
Yeah.
The only two systemic nations that did death camps Okay, 3 systemic nations that did death camps.
Uh-oh.
Of course, Germany. We all know about Germany, Poland.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I'm not talking about the German death camps that the Germans set up. I'm talking about the extermination of the Jews in 39, and those Jews that returned in 46, and the extermination of the German population out of Poland from 1945 to about 1948. There's over 1.5 million Jews, Germans that disappeared. Poland created a mono-ethnic state. It took and Poland's killing quite a few Ukrainians too, especially toward the end of the war, because they knew the borders are going to be getting set. So they started their own genocidal purge that UNA was carrying out against them from the other side.
And that's where those crazy things were in Washington. They were all sure because the Galician Ukrainians, the Lvov Ukrainians, hate the Russians, and the Polish hate the Russians. So they really thought that they'd be able to just gel together, and everyone would want to work together when they all hate each other even more.
Yeah. There's someone the Poles hate more than Russians. That's the Galicians, and the Galicians, someone they hate more than Russians. That's the Poles. Yeah. And then the Hungarians and the Germans and everybody else too. And the third country that did death camps really, really well, they were the English.
Yeah. From the Boer War was when that started.
Yeah, the English had concentration camps everywhere in Africa. By the 1950s and 1940s. Churchill murdered 6 million Bengalese by taking their rice because the Japanese are going to grab it anyways, and we'll just feed England and deal with it. As he said, it's the fault of the for having too many children.
Well, there's a classic
thing about Palestine. It's the reason so many. I love this. This actually came out from a Knesset member, the minister of health, one of the psychopaths sitting in power in Tel Aviv, or Jerusalem, I'm sorry. As they said, the reason there's so many children dying in Palestine is because they have too many children.
Yeah, well, that's a classic. I think that the perception of anyone who's kind of as racist is they always consider the other group to have too many children and breed like rats because they just don't like that other group. That's a universal thing I think we've seen all over the planet. So, well, universal in terms of being irrational and hateful, but yeah. So.
Oh yeah.
So, anyways, I wanted to say it to be clear about. So, when you went to the Donbass recently, because we didn't quite touch on that. You talked about delivering stuff, but so are you doing like you're sort of supporting the war as because I saw you. I was a guest did a guest appearance on Narodny Front, the People's Front. So, are you like doing some sort of what would it be called, philanthropic kind of deal with them, or did you do this on your own? What was your sort of a background to making this trip to the Donbass?
No, this is did on our own. I was working with one group that's they're actually our neighbors. Our neighbors buried their eldest son back last February. He died near Svatova. He's been fighting from day one. And they have their own fund, and they go a lot. And then I went with them quite a few times. This time I went with some other friends that also organize and take equipment and cars down. We're going again January to do the same. By the way, if you want to come, I could get clearance arranged for you to get you across the border.
Unfortunately, let's just put it this way: my employer does not shine friendly on that. I'm not even allowed to go to the Crimea. Or no more salary for Tim. Yeah, no Crimea for the foreseeable future. Yeah, it kind of sucks. But then again, I'm not a huge fan of the Crimea, so it's okay. Oh, telephone kind of switched around. There we go. But, so I'm not going anywhere. But I can tell you that one thing was back in 2013, 2014, I actually did talk to someone about, look, if I volunteer for this thing, how's this thing going to look? Can I just put in 6 months and see how this goes? And they were like, you don't know how to fight. You are half deaf. You don't speak you'll just get killed. Go have kids. That's basically what they told me about that. So that was kind of the answer I got, and I was like, okay. And I do have at least 2 kids, but I'd like to have more. But unfortunately, things didn't quite work out on that front. So,
hey, you can still have more. Come on now, science will help.
Yes, my health is there. So
there's always adoption.
Yeah. There is. So I don't know. I'll think about that. So, but anyways,
we've got.
Yeah, sorry, I
Well,
cut you
actually,
off.
I guess.
Hmm.
Do you have Russian citizenship?
Yes, thank goodness.
Okay.
That
Then
made
you can
everything
adopt, and then you.
so much easier. I don't know, you know. Uh, well, the thing is, you probably
Well,
always had Russian citizenship, or did you have to come back and actually try to fight and get it?
you see, I had Soviet citizenship. Something the
Uh,
U.S. Army didn't know because I had it. My parents lost it when we moved. But however, since I left before I was 16 years old, hell, I was 8. I wasn't even 8 yet. My citizenship, my Soviet citizenship stayed because it was considered that I left against my own free will
oh, I
as a
see.
child.
Okay.
Yeah, the U.S. Army never knew about that. I didn't exactly tell them either about that. But the Soviet Union went away in 1991 anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, no, I'm an anti-communist. I'm a monarchist, so that's
Well, then
that's not an
let's
issue
talk
either.
about that because one thing is here. I'll tell you what. A lot of people actually still kind of get excited. Like foreign people, they get curious about Russia because they're part of some sort of like socialist movements and all that. And like I think the one of the things that's actually nice. What's nice about Russia today is mostly the stuff not connected to the Soviet Union. I think the rejection of all that has really been the better choice, and that the Soviet
Well,
Union, I understand a lot of people gave their lives toward it. They put a lot of effort into it, but ultimately, I think it just really sort of held Russia back.
it did and it didn't. You can't say totally the same. No, look, just because I'm an anti-communist, I'm not a liberal that said destroy everything that was connected with communism.
No.
Which
It's
guy
the
don't?
what was, man. But yeah. So, anyways, what are your opinions on that?
Well, first of all, the Soviet Union they took the base of the Tsarist education system, which was actually a pretty advanced education system, unlike what Western and liberal and communist propaganda said.
Mm-hmm.
Just to understand, when the Tsarist government fell, there were 120,000 schools
Mm-hmm.
in Russia, public schools, 120,000. By the time Stalin, or 110,000, I'm sorry. By the time Stalin died, there were 150,000.
I
Granted, there
see.
was, of course, a civil war and World War One, Civil War, and World War Two in between that. But as we see, there was already a gigantic base foundation built on.
Mm-hmm.
And that system, that education system, we're heading back into that education system because it works. It was one of the best education systems in the world,
Well, could you
if not
explain
the
to me like
best.
what is about it? Because I've mentioned this on my program, and maybe some of my viewers are sick of me here talking about it. But I get into some I don't know, philosophical arguments with Russians who will say everything in the Soviet Union was better. The education system was the best in the world. Okay, why was it the best in the world? What was special about it? It was the best in the
Well,
world. Like, what was so great about the Tsarist educational system? How did it work? How did it develop people into the kind of people we want to have in society?
first of all, if we're going to go into that, almost every education system in a modern country back before 1970 in the West
Mm-hmm.
was a decently good system.
Oh,
If you take the average American student right now or British student, and I'll probably sit there say German or French too, and you gave them a fifth grade exam, I'm talking
yeah.
about seniors, they would all fail it. That's the pathetic thing of it right now. I was when I was doing my second degree, I at night just to get a little extra money because I was still in the military too. I was assisting one of my professors as teaching a lab. So he did the theory, and I was teaching him how to actually program. And there's a function called modding in
Yeah.
programming. So basically, say you've got a number, a date, 1987, and you need the 87, just the 2 years.
Yeah.
You mod the number and you get the 2 years. What modding is, it writes as a percentage sign, and then you divide by 10 or 100 or however many numbers you need at the end of this chain of numbers.
Yeah.
So if you needed 87 out of 1987, you would mod it by 100. So basically, you're dividing by 100 and getting Christ, I can't remember the English word right now for it. It's the 10 or the remainder. That's the
Oh
word.
yeah.
You're getting the remainder. So you're just dividing by 100 or by 10, right?
Yeah.
So these are all engineering students. So I explain to them, everybody understands it, great. I put a couple equations, just basic numbers up on the board, take out paper, write down, I'll check your answers. Everybody starts pulling calculators out. Like, охренеть.
Oh, yeah.
I go to one of the girls that was sitting near where I was standing. I took her calculator away.
Yeah.
Like, what, you can't divide by 10?
Well, yeah, you just
I finished the course of engineering calculus. Great, divide by 10.
Yeah.
I can't. Frick. And this was early 2000s, God help us all.
Well, yeah, my moment with that was, I think, one time, I think I was in middle school, and we were asked to measure something, and I was the only person who knew how to use a ruler. The only one. I was like, man, society is going down here, guys. Then again, I also had a design degree, so when we had oh wait, what's on there? I can't see. The South shall rise again. A little bit, I see. Very stylish.
Yeah, it's General Lee.
Oh, General Lee. I see. A little bit blurry.
General Lee mug.
But so anyways, in college, I actually was. It was weird because I went to a design school, so I was literally the best at math, which I really shouldn't have been. I think I'm just sort of average, like whatever. I've used geometry a lot in my adult life. The other forms of math, not so much. But there I was like the math god because no one knew anything, and it's unbelievable because it's one of those things where I get mad because I can tell you for a fact about math because I'm not good at it myself. I can't say, but they taught us geography. Like, that whole thing of the stereotype with Americans that we can't find anything on a map. Like, there's Americans. We covered that in school. We covered that in school very well. The geography of the United States, and the whole world, and where all this stuff is, and how. Actually, I think the history education I had in the ghetto was good. No one cared. Just pure ears closed. So, I don't know.
Here's against the usual stereotypes.
Yeah.
The stereotype is in the Soviet Union, everybody was a robot. You weren't taught to think. You were taught to be just a repeating little robot, which is crap. Which is Western crap. One of the powerful things about the Soviet education, it taught you to think.
Mm-hmm.
People that hate about the YIGE and everything else is now they're being taught to the test.
Yeah.
There was no teaching test.
Yeah.
You're taught to think. You're taught to do with minimal items. The engineers, the engineers are great because they didn't have calculators and everything else handed to them. They took the minimal and they could create the maximum with it. Mm-hmm. Space stations, massive geo projects, and so on. Nobody was handing computer programs or doing all the thinking for them. And they had to think, and they had to think creatively. And sure, sometimes you had to reinvent the wheel a couple times. But that was the whole point. The education system sponsored responsibility, and it sponsored creative thought. Mm-hmm. And then they went over to...
I think to get your diploma, even a bachelor's degree, you had to sort of like defend a dissertation. So it wasn't like a matter of tests or whatever. You'd have to like write something out and defend your positions and your beliefs and all that. It was more oriented on that kind of defense of your...
Well, there was no bachelor's.
What?
The basic degree was a 6-year... There was no bachelor's degrees.
Oh, there wasn't.
As a matter of fact, away from bachelor's degrees, going back to the Soviet system, there was a 6-year degree. Yeah. That was your bachelor's degree. Actually, it was equivalent to a master's degree. Your basic degree was equivalent to a Western master's degree. Mm-hmm. And it was a hell of a lot more intense. And a hell of a lot... Well, look, even now, I mean, how old are your kids?
13 and 10.
Okay. You got a 13-year-old. You know all the courses he or she.
She.
Okay. You know all the courses she's going through compared to the U.S. education system.
Yeah.
I mean, these days, first grade, the kids are coming in already reading, at least to some basic level. A lot of them started a second language.
Yeah, I can tell you in front of God that at least in this part of Moscow, yeah, they really tried to get the kids, like they had some sort of like there's a term preschool, but I mean like a preparatory course you take before school. So hopefully you start school already reading, in theory. Yeah.
I've known people who took prep school for kindergarten for their kids.
Yeah.
Okay? Their kids went to prep school to go to kindergarten.
Yeah.
This is look. What did you start them at 2 years old? Okay, you can walk now. Great. Here's a notebook. Start writing.
Well, yeah. Well, people want their kids to succeed, which is good. But I'm one of those people where I think too. Sometimes you need to have more life experience and kind of sometimes get out there and work because I'll put it this way: when I look back at people who are really good at academics, they don't necessarily become great like leaders or innovators. They tend to be a little bit more like. I have this information, I'm good at memorizing, I can answer the test, but I'm not going to take any risks, and I'm going to sit in the back and be very quiet and afraid of being alive. That's one problem, again, with the modern Russian system, like you said, with this YEGA test. For those who don't know, it's kind of like the SAT. However, it's mandatory, and it's at a few different levels. It's like in 8th grade and 12th grade or something like that. But anyways, everyone hates it, and it's become basically the only path to what we would call a college education in the United States. And,
no, it's not the only path. There's another path, too.
Tell me, because that would really help. Yeah.
Kids can leave school after 9th grade, and they can go to a college.
Yeah.
This isn't a university. They can go to a college, and if the college is affiliated with a university, they can spend the next 2 years. There's 11 grades. They can spend the next 2 years taking college prep or university prep courses. And then matriculate into the university that this college is associated with.
I see.
You get.
Okay. Well, that might be good.
But that's not an easy course either. That's still not an easy course.
Yeah.
Now, two things that start January 1st, or at least are supposed to start January 1st. One is cell phones are now banned. Cell phone use is banned in classes.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah. To be honest,
Finally.
the school my kids go to, well, my daughter actually changed schools. So at both those schools, no one is allowed to use their cell phone during class. So perhaps there's just no mechanism for the teachers to take it away. Because when I was actually on the Narodny Front program, just before I saw you or after, I forgot the order of events, but like we were sort of a discussion about that. And the one guy who called in was sort of like, well, cell phone is the private property of the child, so you can't take it away. No one said take it away and throw it in the trash can. They said take it away temporarily. I don't see that how that violates the principle of private property in any way, shape, or form, but whatever. So there are some people who are fighting against a sane decision.
Yeah, there's those little mommies that go, oh, well, what happens? I can't get a hold of my little baby who's in class. Well, you were in school. They didn't have cell phones. And somehow when your parents need to get a hold of you,
they could.
They called the principal.
Yeah.
Or the secretary. And if it was an emergency, they got a hold of you. Well, welcome back to the old ways. It worked. So no cheating on cell phones and no texting each other all through class and so on and so on. The other thing is Trud is now again a course.
Oh, thank goodness. Trud. That's very important because, Stanislav, I can tell you that, at least in my region of Cleveland, I was one of the last boys to have metal shop and wood shop. I was the last one. So I think that had a very positive effect on my life. And I'll tell you what, knowing how to make stuff out of wood and metal has helped me a lot during my adult life. Not that I've ever worked doing that, but it's just a very useful thing to know. And I think it would be a good thing if men could know that. If they're bringing that back, that will definitely help raise testosterone levels, raise the testosterone. Because if you can't make stuff out of your own hands, what kind of man are you?
Well, the kids are also going to be doing things like planting trees to beautify the school, things like that. The problem with post 1991 is Russia came in from this Western perspective, and education became a service.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you started thinking of education as a service, everything goes to hell.
I see.
And if as a service, how can I make you do things like, I don't know, clean the blackboard or sweep the floor in your class because that's somebody else has to do it, called a janitorial service because a service. You don't go to a hotel or a restaurant and then go wash the dishes afterwards.
Yeah.
It's a service. Well, now we're going away from that crap model and going back to the system that worked. And kids are going to know that you can do things with your hands. and they're not going to fall off.
Yeah.
Unless you do something really.
That's also very good because it gives people a little bit of humility. Because I mean, honestly, like one thing I even tell people is that like talking to someone who's been in the military is especially like around Moscow, is I say that Moscow is very castrating because boys grow up in an environment where they're in an apartment. There's nowhere to make noise or be loud or run around and scream or try to build stuff. Ironically, even with my son, when my son is at the house with me, he tries to bang things together and do his best to, he doesn't ever want my help, which drives me nuts, but he tries to like make stuff out of wood and experiment because he can go outdoors and do whatever the hell he wants. When he's in Moscow, none of that, you know? And I think the problem is with this whole living in commie block apartments, it's very bad for our sort of like male spirit. And so at least at school, if they're going to get some kids to go outside or try stuff and build stuff or whatever, who the hell knows, do something at least somewhat physical. It'll be way better for men, especially. Boys, I mean.
Well, I'm going to say something that's going to have the vegans screaming off their ignorant heads.
Yeah.
But yeah, humans are a predatory species.
Mm-hmm.
We can live strictly off of a meat diet.
Yeah.
You cannot survive off of a vegan diet that's strictly off of those vegetables and plants or plant matter that grows only in any one biosphere. You can't.
Yeah.
You'll starve. If you look at a vegan diet, they have to mix and match from all over the world, and they still iron deficiency. There's still vitamin B27.
Oh yeah,
that's
I
only
get a kick out of that they try to convince us that there was some sort of manipulation and human beings are supposed to eat only vegetables, yet they're popping all these supplements all day long. It's like, not so much. Not so much.
And that's the problem with cities when you start packing people together. That's why the ones that are less psychologically stable, they go nuts first. Like the kid in Prague. The problem is too many people too close together, and we are a predatory species. Yes, you start getting that itch sometimes. You just want to put somebody down because they're pissing you off, and there's too many people around, and it's just the pressure. But when you're right, when you go in the suburbs, I live outside the city, so I got yard area like that, you know, and it all just goes off of you. Just that pressure goes away because there's room. There's room. There's nature. There's there's fresh air.
And since we're about sort of the same age, or a little bit, I think roughly a smidge older than I am, then you probably remember seeing like reruns of the Andy Griffith Show. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And to be honest, like when it's the problem is with the around Moscow is for 4 months a year, it's not so much like the Andy Griffith Show, but the rest of the year, like when my kids are there and we're like at the house and all that, it's like being back in time. You know, I wake up in the morning, they're not there. They're out, they're talking to other kids in the neighborhood. Everyone just goes wherever the hell they want on bikes. It's amazing. It's like a completely different universe. And for some reason, although there's no barrier, there's no policemen, there's no barbed wire, there's no lasers inside of Moscow, the city, they don't do that. You never wake up and they're just like out somewhere, just like knocking on someone's door, trying to go out and have fun. There's just something about the outdoors and that sort of more suburban rural lifestyle that just is, I think, better for people.
There's also a couple issues. It was interesting enough back when people could actually talk about it in the West. There was an English study that was done that showed that homogeneous societies, I mean racially homogeneous societies, are more peaceful. It's human nature. Like it or not, when you see people that don't look like you, it doesn't mean they would even have to be, you know, if you're white and they're black, it could be a level of somebody like an Italian to a German, or a Romanian to an Englishman. The brain starts to pick that up, and there's a distrust factor that starts to rise, interestingly enough. And it doesn't just work because you see a foreigner. You distrust the foreigner. It starts with that, but it carries over to everybody else, and even the people that are the same racial group. It's just one of those little, crazy human factors. Probably because we were all living in tribes and eating each other for quite a while too.
Well, I talk about on this program a lot the tribal mentality. The tribal mentality and a lot of factors related to sex, gender. Ironically, the real issues related to sex, gender, which they call evolutionary psychology. Those two sort of sets of how to say issues, two sort of sets of explanations as to why things are the way they are never talked about in politics. Not by the left, not by the right, not by anybody. I guess by me and maybe like two other people on the planet. I think that's a major problem. If I ever, Stanislav, if I can ever get the funding that I've been looking for many years to actually turn this program into like a real production with like a crew and all that, and become the next Alex Jones, I'd really like to explore those topics because I think that they explain a lot about the way we live. The way human beings are, but we ignore them. We just don't.
Well,
Yeah.
if you're going to be Alex Jones, you're going to need somebody on there too. Like, who does he have? Or does he not have anybody?
Well, you mean he's like the people who cover for him?
Three people.
Oh, well, yeah, he has like a bunch of people cover for him. That's a big staff. Well, I was a little bit joking about Alex Jones, but I mean that I've put together a lot of presentations to try to get funding to do some kind of like actual media network out of this because I'm kind of a trusted person inside of Russia and all that, but I've never been able to get anyone to bite on it. So I think in some ways the media in Russia has really exploded, but it's an internal explosion. I think overall people have just sort of given up on doing anything in English. We're done with that. Because all my successful projects now are all in Russian, despite the accent. My bread and butter really comes from doing stuff in Russian. So,
Yeah, I'm trying to get. I've been running as in the media for full speed for a little over a year. Before that, I was on and off for a while, for about a year before that. Before that, post military was corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been trying to get my own program too, but you're trying to break in is very difficult, and it's either been one thing or another. I was actually supposed to be on Tsargrad. I was supposed to be a military advisor on there on a weekly program.
Yeah.
And I came back from vacation, and I was talking to the woman who was handling all that. She's like, "Yeah, we need to sign the contract, get it ready." I'm like, "Yeah, no problem. Look, I'll be back in about another 3 days." Came back. I'm like, "Okay, I'm ready to come over there. I can come over there, sign the contract." Yeah, well, our management changed the lineup. And it's been like that constantly.
Oh, dude, I've been there. I have been there with the media so many times before, man. Because I got something real big lined up for February. And this is one of those things where, like, I don't know how to explain it, but inside my mind, it's like I'm counting the days. Like, come February 1st, I'm either going to be doing something huge, or they're going to say, well, we can't do it. Hopes and dreams shattered. So, nah, man, I've been there a bunch of times. Everything can change on the drop of the hat. I'm supposed
to be my own program on Solovyov Live,
Mm-hmm.
But the guy and Vladimir Solovyov, gave the go-ahead, get the program up and running.
Mm-hmm.
But his guy that handles all that, he's busy and he doesn't give a damn. And that program showed up and hasn't materialized in 4 months. So
Gotcha. That's another frustrating one. Well, you're a tough individual. I think that might be one where you're going to have to go in there and kind of shake them a little bit, because ultimately, as you've seen, like with the Russian media, it does kind of follow this tendency of whoever is the Tsar is good. They're the good guy. The farther you get from the Tsar, the worse everything gets. And so you really have to only deal with the Tsar, or I don't know, but that'd be my suggestion. But overall, what you're doing is you're making a great media presence, and that's kind of the main thing, is that's what really gets you those. You're already getting some offers. I think you're doing everything right. You just got to really get in there, especially with Solovyov. I don't know. I don't think Solovyov goes out drinking or anything. I think he's actually pretty tame. No. But if you can kind of become a little bit more friends, he'll get that done, I think.
Yeah, we'll have to live and see how that goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll need to talk to you offline. Maybe we can coordinate kind of something.
But I can tell you one thing that I can tell online is it's funny is for years Solovyov has been like, your accent sucks. Tim, you could do so much in Russia if you didn't have such a shitty accent. I can't do an impression of him. Some people can do a really good impression of him. I'm like, I know. You need to hire a teacher. I'm like, I don't think that's going to help. I really don't. I think it's just It's good. The tongue is glued the way it's glued. I don't think it's going to get any better. But anyways, that's a nice compliment. He thinks I could be capable of some great things in Russia if I didn't have a shitty accent. But anyway, Stanislav, I've taken up a ton of your time. Thank you for wanting to come back on the program, which is great. Do you have any final parting words or something you wanted to say to the audience that we may have blown over or skipped, or I cut you off or something?
Yeah, no problem. Two things. One, for those of you who don't want to sit around and wait till society collapses, I'm talking about the West, you can get Russian citizenship actually pretty quickly. Join the military.
Oh.
And it's not like the US military where you have to serve out 5 years. In the Russian military, once you get through basic, which is about 3 months, you automatically get the citizenship. You take your oath after basic, you get your citizenship, and then you go serve out your minimum 1 year. It'll be in the front line somewhere around there. So it's not all for free, but it's a fast track. And for all of those people sitting around in the West, the recession-bound economies, you Germans, number one. Russia's growing.
No.
That's the overheated economy. That's because of growth, not because of sanctions. Well, the sanctions help the growth. So all you engineers and such getting fired by your companies, they're closing down because they can't afford energy anymore. Yeah, you can move to Russia and get a job.
Yeah, the future's here. The unemployment rate is insanely low. But Stanislav, a lot of the salaries aren't so great. We always have to warn people. I love living here,
yes.
But it's sometimes I have to work multiple jobs. Is basically it. So, and someone who works in the media and is fairly successful, that's kind of a downer. This isn't a one job kind of country. But on the other hand, when you work for yourself, you don't pay much taxes, so you get to keep a lot more.
Well, just to put a few points on that.
Yeah.
First of all, if you're self-employed, it's 6% income tax.
Oh, yeah, it is.
10% when you get the social taxes have to be paid. It's about 7%. If you're working for somebody, it's 13%.
Yeah.
That's if you're self-employed as a businessman. If you're self-employed as just a self-employed working out of your apartment doing something, it's 3%.
Oh, it's
in Russian, there's two different categories.
Even better.
4%. So it's two different categories. In English, it all seems to fall in the same name category, but in Russian, there are two different name categories.
Yeah.
So
it's the 4% one is being self-employed. Yeah. So that's the one thing is I would say that's the reason you come to Russia. You don't come to Russia to work a 9-to-5 job and think you'll get ahead. That doesn't work. If you come to Russia and do something for yourself, you can get so far ahead. And that's the one thing with me who came here to Russia with $200 in their pocket, and now I own multiple pieces of real estate. That's how, because I all working for myself. Being a salary man just doesn't work here, though. I wish it did, and a lot of people want to. They're like, I want to come to Russia and find a job. Like, working a desk job is not going to get you anywhere. It's going to get you maybe even less far than in the West. Although, who knows right now? Apparently, food's insane in America. Yeah?
Where does it get you anywhere?
Yeah,
I mean, look, in the U.S., a dream, which is being in debt for a house, being in debt for a car, being in debt for everything else, and God forbid you ever get sick because you're going to lose everything.
Yeah.
Even much different than most any other country like that.
Yeah. No, in Russia, you got to pay this stuff off, man. This whole idea of the 30-year mortgage doesn't really work here, and it's amazing. Like I have family members who they're just like, but the mortgages are 30 years. But they're 30 years. No, they're not. They don't have to be. You can make double payments, and you're going to cut all the profit the bank takes by making double payments. People just don't get it. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Very true.
Anyways, thank you, Stanislav. A long story short, there are insane, crazy opportunities in Russia. You just have to come here, especially if you work for yourself or if you're willing to serve. So, anyways, Thank you for coming back on the show, friends. Remember, Tim Kirby Russia on Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore on Telegram and Stanislav. How can people find you, be it in Russian or English or whatever language you choose?
In Russian, it's Telegram channel Stas Today Обратно. I've got an English one. Stas was there. Unfortunately, I kind of neglected,
Mm,
so I don't do much with it. I should probably do more,
that's
but
okay.
the majority of everything is on the Russian side,
All
and I
right.
post my own stuff, different interviews and all, and other interesting articles I come across or interesting points of view.
All right. Then see you guys later in the next episode of Tim Kirby Russia.